Falling in love is emotional chemistry. Growing in love is conscious compatibility. There's a distinct difference between the initial rush of attraction and the sustainable rhythm of a long-term connection. When we fall in love, what we're really experiencing is emotional chemistry, a powerful instinctive pull towards someone that often feels magical. It can be sparked by a glance, a conversation, or simply the feeling that this person gets us in a way no one else ever has. This chemistry is what makes your heart race, your stomach flip, and your thoughts obsessively loop around them. It's not necessarily logical, and it doesn't always take compatibility into account. It's instinctive and in many ways involuntary. You don't decide to fall in love, it just happens. And while it's exciting, even addictive, it's not always a reliable foundation for something lasting. This is where people often get caught. They mistake chemistry for compatibility. Just because someone gives you butterflies doesn't mean you can build a life with them. Emotional chemistry can blind you to red flags, gloss over important differences in values, life goals, or emotional needs. It creates a kind of fantasy lens where we project what we want to see instead of what's really there. The connection feels effortless at first, but that effortlessness can be deceptive. The truth is, real relationships, the ones that last, require effort, choice, and shared intention. That's where growing in love comes in. Growing in love means moving from that initial emotional spark to a deeper, more sustainable bond. It's not passive. It's not driven purely by how someone makes you feel in a moment. It's a conscious process of aligning with someone, not just emotionally, but mentally, spiritually, and practically. Compatibility doesn't mean being exactly the same. It means being different in ways that complement each other, and more importantly, being willing to work together through the differences. While chemistry asks, do we feel good together? Compatibility asks, can we thrive together through the seasons of life? Growing in love is what happens after the high wears off, after the fantasy fades and reality sets in. It's what you choose to build when you realize this person isn't perfect. And neither are you, but you still want to show up, communicate, compromise, and invest. It's rooted in emotional maturity, trust, and a shared commitment to growth, not just as a couple, but as individuals. Where falling in love often asks nothing from you but surrender. Growing in love asks everything of you: patience, resilience, self-awareness, vulnerability. But the reward, a connection that deepens, that adapts, and that stays strong even when the chemistry fades for a while. So yes, emotional chemistry starts the fire, but conscious compatibility keeps it burning. Without compatibility, chemistry burns out. Without chemistry, compatibility can feel cold. But together, that's when love becomes something truly extraordinary. Falling in love is something that often feels like it happens to you. You don't prepare for it, you don't plan it, and you certainly don't control the timing. It's passive by nature, sudden, overwhelming, and in many ways effortless. You meet someone, there's a spark, and without warning, you find yourself thinking about them constantly, checking your phone, smiling at nothing, and replaying every moment in your head. You didn't choose this reaction, your emotions did. It's like gravity. Once you're caught in its pull, you're just falling. And while it's a beautiful and thrilling experience, it doesn't require much from you other than surrender. You simply allow it to sweep you off your feet. But growing in love, that's a different story. Growing in love demands something of you. It's intentional. It's not something that just happens. It's something you do actively every day. It requires showing up consistently, even when things aren't easy, even when the butterflies are gone, even when you're tired, stressed, or not feeling particularly romantic. It's in the small, repeated decisions. Choosing to listen instead of shutting down. Choosing to stay when it would be easier to walk away. Choosing to be kind when you're frustrated. And choosing to work through conflict rather than avoid it. Growing in love is an action. It's a set of behaviors and choices made over time that deepen the bond and build trust. Where falling in love feels like magic, growing in love is about maturity. It's the difference between being caught up in feelings versus creating a foundation that lasts. One is a moment, the other is a process. One relies on chemistry, the other relies on character. And here's the key truth. While you don't control when you fall in love, You absolutely control whether that love grows. Passion will fade in moments, attraction will fluctuate, but commitment, respect, communication, and shared growth are the factors that sustain love through the highs and lows. Many people get stuck because they expect the passion of falling to last forever, and when it doesn't, they assume something's wrong. They think if it's not exciting anymore, maybe we're not right for each other. But the truth is, love changes form, it evolves. What starts as excitement can become something more powerful. A steady, dependable, nurturing connection that doesn't just feel good, but is good for you. Growing in love may not always feel like the rush of falling, but it's where you find the depth, peace, and security that make a relationship truly meaningful. So if falling in love is about emotions happening to you, growing in love is about effort happening through you. It's the difference between being swept away and choosing to build something that lasts. One may start the journey, but only the other can carry it forward. Falling in love often feels like a whirlwind, something that happens effortlessly and catches us off guard. It's a sensation, a rush, a wave that overtakes us without warning. There's no strategy, no checklist, no deliberate movement toward it. It simply unfolds. You meet someone, there's an energy, a vibe, a spark that pulls you in. You laugh at their jokes, feel connected in conversation, and suddenly your emotions are running the show. You're thinking about them constantly, replaying moments, fantasizing about the future. It feels powerful, but it's almost entirely passive. You didn't choose for your heart to race. It just did. You didn't schedule the longing. It arrived on its own. This is what makes falling in love so intoxicating. It feels effortless, like magic. But that magic doesn't build a lasting relationship. Growing in love, on the other hand, is active. It doesn't happen by accident or because of luck. It requires presence, consistency, and emotional investment. It's not just about feeling something for someone. It's about doing something with that feeling. It's about showing up over and over again when things are easy, and especially when they're not. Growing in love means choosing to understand someone when they frustrate you. It means communicating even when you'd rather shut down. It means apologizing when your ego wants to be right. It's not glamorous, and it's not always romantic in the traditional sense, but it's real. It's the work that turns infatuation into partnership. When we fall in love, we often focus on how someone makes us feel. But growing in love challenges us to think about how we make them feel. Are we safe for them? Are we consistent? Are we someone they can count on not just when the sun is shining, but when storms come? Because those storms will come. That's inevitable in any long-term connection. And if the foundation of love is built only on what was easy and electric in the beginning, it won't survive the weight of real life. It's easy to show up when everything feels perfect, when the emotions are strong and there's no resistance. But that's not growth. Growth happens in the effort. It's when you make space for someone else's pain even when you're carrying your own. It's when you create safety by being honest, gentle, and dependable. It's when love moves from being a feeling you're lucky to have to a practice you commit to daily. You don't grow in love by accident. You grow in love by intention. That's what makes it so meaningful. Not because it came easy, but because it was worth choosing again and again. So while falling in love may feel like fate, growing in love is where the real beauty lies. In the effort, in the choice, and in the quiet strength of two people who decide not just to fall, but to build. Falling in love brings with it a rush of excitement that is unlike anything else. It feels electric, unpredictable, and exhilarating. You're captivated by someone's presence, constantly thinking about them, and swept up in the novelty of it all. Every interaction feels new and full of potential. You get butterflies, your heart races, and suddenly the world looks a little brighter. It's thrilling because it's uncertain. You don't yet know where things are headed. And in that uncertainty, your mind fills in the blanks with hope, fantasy, and idealism. The excitement comes from the unknown, from discovery, from anticipation. This stage is intoxicating and often referred to as the honeymoon phase because everything feels light, passionate, and emotionally heightened. But as time goes on, that initial high begins to soften. And this is where many people mistake the natural evolution of love for the loss of love itself. The absence of constant butterflies doesn't mean something's wrong. It means something deeper is beginning. This is where growing in love begins to take shape. And with it comes a very different kind of emotional experience, one rooted in security and depth rather than adrenaline. Growing in love doesn't give you a constant rush, but it gives you something better, a sense of peace. Instead of being consumed by thoughts of whether they'll text back or what they're thinking, you rest in the comfort of knowing where you stand. You don't need constant reassurance because the love feels stable, mutual, and trustworthy. That doesn't mean it's without emotion. Far from it. But it's a different kind of emotion. It's quieter, more grounded. It shows up in the small things. Remembering your favorite tea, checking in when you're anxious, holding space for your dreams or fears without judgment. It's not always thrilling, but it's real. And that realness becomes a new kind of fulfillment. One that isn't about the constant high, but about the depth of being seen, supported, and emotionally safe. This is a transition many people struggle with because they've been conditioned to associate love with constant excitement. When that fades, they think the connection has too, but excitement is not the same as love. Real love deepens, expands, and becomes more textured with time. You begin to love someone, not just for how they make you feel, but for who they are when the masks are off, and for how you show up for each other through the mundane, the messy, and the ordinary. So while falling in love gives you a spark, growing in love gives you something more powerful, the slow burning flame of emotional intimacy. The excitement may ignite the journey, but it's the depth that carries it forward. Not through adrenaline, but through emotional security and shared growth. Falling in love can feel instantaneous. It often happens before you even realize it, sweeping you into a state of emotional intensity that makes everything feel heightened. Time slows down. Conversations feel meaningful, and every small interaction carries weight. It might start with a spark, a glance, a single moment that leaves a mark. Within days or weeks, you might find yourself feeling deeply connected to someone you've barely begun to know. The pace feels fast, but it also feels right, even fated. That's the allure of falling in love. It makes us feel like we found something extraordinary in an ordinary world. But as powerful as that feeling is, it often develops long before the foundation for a healthy relationship has been built. It comes quickly, but that speed doesn't necessarily equal strength or stability. In contrast, growing in love unfolds slowly. It's the product of time, of shared experiences, of learning someone's true character. Not just who they are when they're trying to impress you, but who they are when life gets hard, when stress kicks in, when they're tired, or when you disagree. It takes time to see how they handle conflict, how they support your goals, how they treat others, and whether they truly listen and care for your needs beyond the romance. These insights don't reveal themselves in the first few weeks. They're revealed gradually, over months and sometimes years. That's what makes growing in love so valuable. It's not based on how someone makes you feel in the moment, but on how consistent and supportive they are over time. This contrast in speed can create confusion. People often mistake the intensity of falling for the depth of real connection, only to feel let down later when the emotional highs begin to level out. That's not a sign that the love is fading. It's a sign that the relationship is evolving. The transition from falling to growing can feel less exciting at first, but that's only because you're moving into a space where real emotional work begins. You're no longer riding the wave of instant emotion. You're building something with intention. That takes time, communication, and effort. When you fall in love quickly, you haven't yet seen the full picture of your partner, or even how your lives truly fit together. It's only with time that you learn whether you complement one another, whether you can support each other through life's inevitable changes, and whether your values are aligned. Growing in love gives space for those truths to surface, slowly, honestly, and naturally. It doesn't rush to the destination, but respects the process. While falling in love may feel like a powerful beginning, growing in love is what transforms that beginning into something lasting, meaningful, and real. What comes fast might spark passion, but what grows slowly creates a foundation that can truly stand the test of time. Falling in love often feels like you're being swept away in a story. It's exciting, unpredictable, and full of fantasy. You imagine the best in the other person and often idealize who they are, focusing on the highlights rather than the full picture. During this stage, you're more likely to overlook incompatibilities or red flags because your emotions are so strong and your hope is so high. You might project qualities onto them that aren't fully there, simply because you want them to be. You're building a version of this person in your mind, not necessarily based on reality, but based on desire, possibility, and emotion. That's not a bad thing, it's human. But it's important to recognize that falling in love can sometimes be more about what you hope someone will be than who they truly are. When you fall in love, you often prioritize how that person makes you feel. Do they make you feel special, desired, seen? Those feelings can be addictive, and they form the basis of many whirlwind romances. But they can also create blind spots. You might convince yourself that differences don't matter, or that certain issues will sort themselves out over time. You're not really seeing the whole of the other person yet. You're seeing the parts that light you up, and ignoring or minimizing the parts that might later create friction. This is why falling in love, while thrilling, isn't always the most accurate measure of long-term potential. Growing in love, on the other hand, means beginning to love someone as they are. Not as you imagined, not as you hoped, and not as they were on their best behavior in the early days. It's about seeing the full, unfiltered person in front of you, their strengths and struggles, their quirks and their contradictions, and choosing to care deeply for that person, not a version of them you created in your head. That kind of love is grounded. It doesn't rely on fantasy. It depends on understanding, acceptance, and trust. When you grow in love with someone, you no longer love them because of how they make you feel alone. You love them because of who they are, independent of how they serve your needs or fantasies. It's less about what you're getting and more about what you're creating together. This shift is powerful because it moves love from a self-centered place, I love how you make me feel, to a shared connection that honors both people as individuals. So while falling in love may be fueled by dreams and projections, growing in love is about waking up to reality and still choosing to stay. That choice, repeated over time, is what turns love from a feeling into a foundation. It's not built on fantasy. It's built on truth, and that's what makes it last. Falling in love often creates the illusion of alignment. In the early stages, everything feels so right that it's easy to assume you and your partner want the same thing. You focus on the emotional connection, the physical chemistry, and the shared moments that make your heart race. In that stage, you're usually not thinking deeply about long-term logistics. You're thinking about how much you feel for this person. You may believe that because your bond is so intense, the rest will naturally fall into place. And that belief can be comforting, but it's not always accurate. Emotional intensity doesn't guarantee alignment in life goals, values, or lifestyle choices. You can be madly in love with someone and still be fundamentally incompatible when it comes to how you want to live your lives. This is one of the most sobering realizations in relationships, that love alone isn't always enough. You might love someone deeply, and they might love you back. But if one of you wants children and the other doesn't, if one values financial freedom and the other values security at all costs, or if one dreams of traveling the world while the other wants to build roots in one place, these differences matter. And in the falling stage, those things are often overlooked or minimized. You tell yourself you'll figure it out later, or that love will conquer the differences. But without real alignment, those differences don't just disappear. They eventually surface and can create resentment, tension, and painful choices. Growing in love brings all of that to the forefront. It's when you start having the conversations that matter. What kind of life do we want to build? Do our priorities match? How do we handle money, family, conflict, ambition? These conversations aren't always easy. In fact, they can be uncomfortable, but they're necessary. Because growing in love isn't just about loving each other more. It's about discovering if you're building the same future or two very different ones. It's the part where compatibility becomes more important than chemistry, where reality replaces fantasy, and where alignment becomes the glue that holds love together. You begin to see love not just as an emotional experience, but as a partnership. And like any partnership, it needs shared vision and mutual direction to thrive. If two people are pulling in opposite directions, no amount of affection can keep them moving forward together. But if both people are aligned, not perfectly but meaningfully, they create a foundation where love isn't just a feeling, but a plan, a structure, and a shared mission. So while falling in love might blur the edges and mask the differences, growing in love sharpens the focus. It reveals what's really there, and it gives both people the chance to decide, are we just emotionally connected, or are we truly walking the same path? That decision is what determines whether love simply burns bright for a moment or shines steadily for a lifetime. Falling in love often brings with it an unconscious pull towards someone who meets your emotional needs in the moment. You feel seen, desired, important, and without realizing it, you may begin to attach your emotional well-being to that person. You start to depend on their affection, their attention, their validation. When they compliment you, you feel on top of the world. When they withdraw even slightly, you feel anxious or unsteady. This emotional dependence isn't always obvious at first, because it's disguised as intense passion or deep connection. But when your emotional state begins to rise and fall with their behavior, that's a signal that you may be relying on them to regulate your own sense of worth or stability. This is where falling in love can become risky, especially if you haven't yet built emotional security within yourself. You may confuse intensity with depth or consistency with care and lose sight of your own emotional boundaries. You begin to crave their presence not out of partnership, but out of emotional need. The fear of losing them becomes greater than the desire to maintain your own inner peace. This is when love turns from something beautiful into something consuming, where your sense of identity begins to merge with how someone else treats you. Growing in love, however, looks very different. It requires emotional independence. It's when two whole individuals come together, not to complete each other, but to complement one another. When you grow in love, you don't seek someone to fill your emotional gaps. You seek someone to walk beside you as you both continue to grow. You recognize that your partner cannot be your sole source of happiness or healing, and that real love flourishes when both people take responsibility for their own emotional needs. You can enjoy their love without becoming dependent. And while it's natural to enjoy that kind of affection, it becomes problematic when it becomes the main source of your self-worth. You begin to feel like your identity is tied to how much you are wanted, instead of how much you truly value yourself independent of others. This dependency creates a fragile kind of confidence. One minute you're flying high because they're giving you what you need, attention, compliments, time. And the next minute, you're full of self-doubt because they're distant or distracted. You question yourself when they pull away. You chase them when they withdraw. Your sense of value becomes reactive, shaped by their behavior rather than your own core sense of self. And the danger in that is that it teaches you to seek external validation as your primary source of worth, which is not sustainable. If someone else can give it, they can also take it away. And that leaves you powerless. Growing in love changes that dynamic completely. When you grow in love, and more importantly, when you've done the work to build self-worth on your own, the relationship is no longer your mirror for value. You already know who you are. You already know your worth. You don't need constant validation to feel secure because that security comes from within. You are with someone not because you need them to approve of you, but because you want to build something together from a foundation of mutual respect. This doesn't mean you don't still appreciate your partner's affection or admiration. Of course you do. We all want to feel loved. But the key difference is this: your self-esteem isn't built on it. You don't collapse emotionally if they're having a bad day. You don't start doubting your beauty, your intelligence, or your value because they didn't respond the way you hoped. You remain steady because your worth isn't up for negotiation. In a healthy relationship rooted in growing love, each person brings their own self-worth to the table. There's a sense of emotional stability, not emotional neediness. You both know who you are, and your love becomes something that adds to your life, not something you depend on to feel okay about yourself. That's where real love thrives. Not in a space where one person gives you worth, but in a space where you both recognize the worth you already had and choose each other from that place of strength. Falling in love often fills you with hope and possibility. You imagine a future with this person that looks effortless and joyful. It's easy to believe that if the feelings are strong enough, the relationship will naturally work out. During this phase, you might overlook important aspects of the relationship that could cause problems later, Because you're so focused on the emotional connection and the excitement of new love, you may tell yourself that everything will be fine because love conquers all, or that you can fix any issues that arise. This optimism can be uplifting, but it can also set you up for disappointment if you're not careful. Growing in love, however, demands a different mindset, one rooted in realism and intentionality. As love deepens, it becomes clear that relationships aren't just about feelings. They're about choices, actions, and commitment. This stage requires looking at the relationship with clear eyes, acknowledging both the strengths and the weaknesses. It means being honest with yourself and your partner about what's working and what isn't. Growth in love asks you to move beyond idealism and engage with the reality of who you both are, including your flaws, habits, and differences. This realistic approach doesn't diminish love, it enhances. When you're willing to see the relationship clearly, you're in a better position to nurture it in healthy ways. You're more open to communication, to compromise, and to working through challenges instead of ignoring them. You understand that love is not just a feeling that comes and goes, but a commitment to keep showing up, even when it's difficult. It's in this commitment that love becomes stronger and more resilient. Being realistic in love also means recognizing that not every relationship is meant to last forever, and that's okay. Sometimes, growing in love reveals incompatibilities or fundamental differences that weren't obvious. Falling in love is the spark, the rush of emotion that draws us in, excites us, and awakens our hearts. It's beautiful, intoxicating, and necessary to start any meaningful connection. But if we stop there, if we mistake falling in love for the whole story, we risk building something fragile, based only on feelings and fantasy. Growing in love is where the true power lies. It's the intentional, conscious choice to see someone fully, their strengths and their flaws, and to commit to building a partnership grounded in reality, trust, and respect. It's about moving from dependency to emotional independence, from hope to clarity, from fantasy to truth. This is the love that lasts because it's built on something real, something steady. So, whether you are just beginning to fall or already growing in love, remember, the greatest relationships don't rely solely on how they start, but on how they are nurtured every day. Love is not just a feeling to experience, it's a commitment to create. And that commitment is the difference between a fleeting romance and a lifetime of connection. Choose to grow in love, and you choose to build something lasting, meaningful, and profoundly rewarding.